What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. So before we actually get into this topic, I would like for you all to do me a couple different favors. And first of all, subscribe to my channel by hitting the subscribe button. I would like for you all to share, comment, like, and whatever you can do to support my page and everything that I talk about here. Today, I want to talk about a topic that people voted on my Instagram stories. So in other words, I put out 4 different topics that I could potentially talk about in YouTube videos, and I allow my audience who supports me on Instagram to vote on the one that they most wanted to hear. And this topic is actually one of 2 that were tied for the top things that people wanted me to talk about out of the things that I gave them as an option to select. Today, I'm going to talk about bullying, specifically how I feel about bullying, and then who do I believe are the 3 biggest types of bullies that exist today. From my perspective, when we just look at the concept of bullying, I hate it. I can't stand a bully. I can't stand the idea of bullying, and I think that it's something that needs to seriously be addressed. But I go a little bit deeper than most people do. I look at the psychology of why it actually exists and what is the point of bullying someone or for bullying to exist itself. From my perspective, how I see it is that bullying is a sign of an individual or an individual's behavior where they take their frustrations out on someone else because of an insecurity that they're trying to hide. It's usually something about them that they are highly insecure about or highly defensive about or highly whatever it is. Sometimes it's jealousy. It's a lot of different things that could actually happen. But the point I'm trying to make is that people bully other people generally because there's a hidden insecurity that they have that makes them act out and treat someone a certain way to the point where they're tormenting them. Now, in foundational Black American culture, there's been a discussion somewhat about the difference between bullying somebody and roasting them. Now, to me, these are 2 different things. Roasting is kind of like a playful joke where you joke around with somebody or you kind of pick at them. You may say a little name about them here or there, especially if like you cool with them. I'm talking about like people who are actually cool. Like we're cool, we kick it and that type of thing, like your friends and stuff like that. Me and my friends, we used to, run around and talk, shit about each other all the time. So that type of thing is acceptable. What's not acceptable is constant tormenting somebody to the point where you're driving them to want to do something harmful to themselves or harmful to you, or they're just scared. They don't want to be in that same environment with you because of whatever it is that you're going through. But more than the bully, I'm mad at the person who influenced the bully to be that way, which generally is a bigger bully. So what I mean by that is I think a lot of times people are also afraid of bullies and they don't want to address the bullying itself. So they in turn become soldiers or henchmen or henchwomen for the so-called bullies, from my perspective. And I think there's also a difference between time periods, right? When we think about bullying, we can think about this concept of when you're a little kid or when you're like a young kid, you're, in 4th grade or you're in 5th grade or that type of thing. And you're in school and you have one kid picking on another kid constantly, which again goes back to that concept of constant torment, which I definitely believe was a thing. And it definitely was a thing if you were a blurred as well too. I don't care what nobody says. There were blurreds who got bullied, and I don't know why everybody's trying to pretend. Well, I do know why. I think people just have accountability issues, but everybody tries to pretend like it didn't happen, or they try to put it back on the person who they bullied. They try to say, oh, it's because they're socially awkward. Oh, it's because, they were into things like anime and they were pretending to be the characters, which are all really stupid ass excuses to bully somebody. But I think the point that I'm trying to get at here is that I think that there's a difference between that childlike bullying that used to go on and the bullying that is more systematic that goes on today. And I think that the systematic one that goes on today doesn't really get addressed because it isn't really seen as bullying. It's just seen as something else outside of that. But when really it still goes under the husk of bullying itself. So let me tell you about the 3 things that I believe, or the 3 types of people that I believe are the biggest bullies in society. The command number 3 is the so-called empowered black woman, or the so-called empowered woman. And the reason why I threw black woman in there is because I'm going to talk about shea butter sambaism a little bit. But the so-called empowered woman, just in general, is the third biggest type of bully that I think exists. I don't know exactly when this movement started, but it definitely was recognizable to me, at least in the 2000s. But there has been an uproar of women who believe that they're empowered and they hate men or they dislike men because of whatever reason. Now, and I'm saying that from their perspective because, you know, I think that this is a very tangled web, right? There's a lot of ways to kind of unpack this issue. The main way being that there's white feminism, and then there's this idea that white women had issues with white men, and the two of them are in a tussle, and white women decided to bring black women into that. And so now black women are saying that they're feminist and having certain issues with black men, but a lot of that is stuff that's been projected onto them because of the fact that a lot of the white supremacists don't want to see black men and black women together. So there's that concept going on. But I think there's a lot of other things that are going on in the background as well, too. And I can talk about that at another time. But the point I'm trying to make is that they are some of the biggest bullies because they believe that their trauma or their frustrations, because of the things that they've experienced with men, they believe that they can take those things out on other men that they see or other men who categorically are like the men that they had issues with. So let me kind of elaborate on what I mean by that. I think that they're bullies because of the fact that a lot of times we've been placed into this situation where a lot of men, especially black men is what I'm really focused on here, have been placed in a position where they cannot speak, they cannot have their opinions, they cannot express their emotions, they cannot not express their emotions or do all these other things without being browbeat or disrespected or treated terribly by these women in media. So a lot of times I'm talking about issues between black men and black women, but really this is an all woman issue. And the reason why I'm going to say this is because it actually started with white women projecting this thing onto black women and messing up the camaraderie that existed once between black men and black women. So the reason why I bring all this up is to say that it goes back to my example about how you have bullies, but then you have bullies who basically influence other people to be bullies or bully henchmen. So now you have these white women who want to basically have issues with white men, and it's really a struggle for control and power and all this other stuff. And they've influenced black women to basically see that the same way because they both are women. And some of them have even gone as far, and I'm just talking about the white women at this point, as to make it seem like black men and white men are either equal or black men are worse in being oppressors of women, which is absolutely bullshit and bonkers because there's nothing that a black man can actually control. So what they're basically saying is that we can be oppressors of them, when in actuality, if you really look at the history, a lot of white women have been slave owners, rapists, and all these other things in history to black men, and they've done all these terrible things to them. I mean, and really when you think about it, even some of those feminists like the Elizabeth Stantons and people like that, some of those feminists had a lot of denigrating and terrible things to say about black men actually. So it's interesting how they're trying to flip the roles and to say that, oh, it's them, they're terrible, they're this, they're that. So what they're doing is they're getting soldiers themselves to beat up on men, specifically black men, because of their issues or problems that they have with the men who are in their lives. So that's why I would say that. Now, as far as the Shea Butter Samba class, a lot of them have felt that they have residual issues with black men for the most part, and the reason why is because a lot of them probably, in my opinion, feel let down by black men not having things for them. Now, I believe this is to be a civil rights generation old nigga issue, but we'll talk about that on another day as well too. Point I'm trying to make though is that a lot of them are pretty angry because of the fact that they feel like they've lost trust in black men, so they don't have respect for the young ones that are coming up, and so they mistreat them, they talk badly about them on social media and all these other things that really aren't too necessary, and really, and to be honest, it's actually not happening as badly as social media is portraying it, because there's a lot of camaraderie between black men and black women, but social media, when you go on there, it makes it seem like that actually doesn't exist. So I think that they are some of the biggest bullies, because there's this need to support when a lot of these women, the ones I'm speaking about, speak up in this way, and they speak negatively on black men, especially if all they say is men, and they're not really categorizing who is who. I think that it's generally supported, is generally heard, and then it's seen as acceptable. But if we men, specifically black men, go and do the same thing, then it's not really seen as something that's acceptable. Our voices aren't heard, we're shunned, we're talked about, all types of things. So that's why I would say that they're the third biggest. The second biggest, in my opinion, type of bully is the old nigga, or the civil rights generation person. And I think I kind of just talked about them a second ago. The reason why they're the second biggest bully is because they have basically caused so many chain reactions of issues that have gone on. First of all, some of those bullies that you all dealt with back in the day, it was because a civil rights generation, excuse me, it was because a civil rights generation old nigga probably influenced them to act in that way. Because there's a stereotypical understanding of the way that I think a lot of them believe black people should be acting. Now, some people are confusing that with codification, which I don't really think is codification. I think it's that there's just a way that certain people act, and there's always like an element of self-hate even within us. And I think a lot of them had some self-hate, and they you know, like wanted to basically mistreat other black people because they have a bad outlook on black people in general, which is why a lot of them, if you ever look at like your parents and grandparents, if you're a millennial like me, you'll see that a lot of them talk very badly about black society. They talk about how we need to get our stuff together, how we're really not shit, and they really have like a lot of bad and denigrating things to say about black people in general. I would say mostly our generation and a few of the ones below, but like in general, they have bad things to say about black people and all the bad and degenerate things that we do. And that's because they've always had a very negative outlook on the way, on how they viewed black people and in general. Now, I think the other part of it too, and the reason why I call them bullies, is because they're big time manipulators. A lot of people don't realize that these old niggas are a lot smarter than the way that you all treat them. They know exactly what they're doing. A lot of them gave up their, they basically sold out their children and grandchildren for racial sexual access, integration, and a lot of other things. And again, that's a topic I want to get into in another video. I don't want to talk about it so much in this video. Point I'm trying to make though is that a lot of these civil rights generation Negroes, they really didn't have a plan for their kids, because their plan was to basically get these trinkets and benefits, and then they just send all their kids and grandkids to college and told them, you know, you need to get your education and all this other shit. And then when they went there, they end up with a whole bunch of debt, and they just really just didn't care. But then anytime that you challenge any of these old folks, what they go back and they say is that, you know, back in my day, blah, 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 blah. They kind of go into all that babble and stuff like that. But when you look at the actual history, you can see that they didn't really do anything. Like there were civil rights activists, so don't get me wrong, because you had the MLKs, you had Malcolm X's, and you had people like that. But I think what I'm getting at is that a vast majority of them really sold us out, and they're not really trying to say it. So they're big time manipulators. So part of bullying is like a psychological game. It's not just physically assaulting somebody or verbally assaulting somebody. It's manipulating them and treating them a certain way so that they do not know how to behave, or they have to behave out of their element because of the way that you're pushing them. And a lot of the old niggas have actually done that, but the thing is that it's very seldom talked about, because too many of us are too afraid to actually tell them the truth about what they messed up, what they squandered, and how they basically have failed our generation. And really, a lot of their choices have actually influenced a lot of other people to behave in the way that they do. I'm not saying that other people aren't responsible for their choices. I'm just saying that they had a role to play in it. So that's why you see a lot of these shea butter sandals, as I talked about, or these so-called, you know, empowered women who behave in such a way. I'm not saying they're the only ones impacted. A lot of people behave that way as well too. So that's the second biggest bully that I would say exists. The biggest bully, and most of y'all probably know what I'm going to say, is the white supremacist or the racist. They are the biggest bully who has ever existed. They control systems. They have power. They have power in all types of areas of activity. Literally every area of activity. They have control in. They can control the way that people behave. They can control people's finances. They can control people's living situations, their health. They can impact media. They can impact education. They literally can do anything they want to. They've created systems to mistreat black people. They've created systems to not repay black people. They've created systems to kill black people with impunity. I mean, I can go on and on and on about all the terrible, horrible things they did. And I'm going to be honest with you, they influenced all the other two bullies I just talked about. They manipulated the old, or like try to make a deal with the old niggas, manipulated them. And then they also really influence, and in my opinion, they instigate and perpetuate this beef between black men and black women. And one of the reasons why I think that they do that is because they know that they control everything. And if these certain group of black women feel that they have been let down by black men, then they can just go right to the white supremacists for all of these different jobs and opportunities and things like that, which they've done tons of times historically. I think the point I'm trying to make is that they're the biggest bullies because they control everything. And they also are rooted in deception. That's their main tactic. That's the main thing that they do. So they're manipulative. They're like basically the whole package of bully. They're manipulative. They're physically abusive. They're emotionally abusive. They're psychologically abusive. So everything that you would think is in one particular bully or another, they literally have it all. And I mean, like, even when you go back and you just look at like the kid aspect of white supremacy, a lot of those little white kids were very racist in school, and they treated black kids, especially if they went to school with them, like shit. And most of the time it was racism, which is different than me being a black roasted or tormented by one or two stupid ass kids. These white kids were being highly racist, and the reason why is because they learned that level of white supremacy from their parents and grandparents who taught them early how to behave in that way. And that's why I always say that a lot of these bullies that you see became bullies because a bigger bully or some type of person who taught them to be that way taught them to be that way. So the point that I'm trying to make, though, is that bullying is not good. It is something that we definitely need to tackle, and it's not something that needs to go ignored. A lot of people like to say, well, just ignore them, move forward, yada, 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 yada. I keep saying this over and over again. I say this on Instagram all the time, and I'm going to say it here on YouTube as well. You do not run from a bully. You attack the bully head on. You do not run from problems. You address problems head on. And that's why I use my platform to talk about the things that I believe are issues and things that need to be tackled and need to be talked about and need to really just be flushed out. So that's my take on that. Anyway, y'all, that's all I got to say for today. I just wanted to kind of bring this topic to basically to the forefront, because I know that that's something that a lot of people wanted to hear me speak about, especially from like the pro-black, like the race standpoint. So I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I hope y'all got to get something educational from what I said. I hope that y'all have a good rest of y'all's day. And before you dip out, if you have not hit that subscribe button, make sure you do that and you share this video. Anyway, I hope y'all have, again, a great rest of y'all's, I keep saying day, it's actually nighttime here. A great rest of y'all's night, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.